This is my first time doing a Zoom thing where I'm talking to, I guess, having loads of people watch me while having a conversation with somebody. But yeah, I'll just tell you a little bit about myself. So I'm the project trainee officer at Cordwainers Grow. And so currently I'm learning about organic growing and just being involved in the growing community. I'm very, very new to the space, so I'm very excited to have the conversation with Tayshan in terms of learning about his experience as a person of color within the growing scene. What else? The reason why I kind of was led to growing sustainably is basically I'm from Zimbabwe and I've just had this passion to go back and like relocate there within the next 5 years. And I would like to go back and start an eco village. So I figured I obviously need to start learning the basics of, organic growing and exploring different growing systems like permaculture and food forest growing, just to bring those principles back to Africa to help a lot of people farm sustainably. And just, what else? I don't think I have much more to say. So I'm super excited to have this conversation with Tayshan. Hopefully I'll learn a lot of things. Hopefully you learn a lot of things. So I'm gonna pass it on to Tayshan to briefly introduce himself. And then afterwards we can start having the conversation and take it from there. Yep, over to you, Tayshan.
Thank you, Princess. So I'm Tayshan, and I'm a young-ish. I'm just turned 24, so I feel like I can hold on to that young status for a few more years. But I'm a young, passionate horticulturer. Oh, I don't really like to call myself a gardener because I've never called myself a gardener. I've always had a passion for nature, and it's been more of a subconscious influence rather than like a conscious influence, and then it's come out in kind of a time of trauma. So I'm the founding director of Grow to Know, which is all about engaging with a more younger audience through horticulture, whilst also kind of diversifying and diversifying the horticultural scene. Because I feel like when I first started gardening, I definitely felt very isolated. So when I found myself in a green space, kind of trying to garden and figuring it out for myself, bear in mind there was no experience, there was no kind of knowledge to what I was doing. It was just a matter of getting in there, guerrilla gardening, technically speaking. I mean, my passion is kind of giving a platform to people who are similar to myself and from similar backgrounds to myself, and giving them that confidence to kind of reap the benefits of nature. At the moment, I feel like it's something that's quite, how would you say it? To actually be involved in the gardening scene, you have to reach out to a certain extent, and you have to, fit into a certain group at this moment in time. And I feel like that perception needs to change slightly to make people a bit more comfortable with getting involved. I think it is quite isolating at the moment. But about myself, I'm from North Kensington, Ladbroke Grove, around that area. My heritage, my mum's Egyptian Kuwaiti, my dad's Jamaican Italian. So I've got, as you can say, I've got a real passion for diversifying horticulture, because I feel like all these different corners of my family have very different methods and cultures and ways. And hopefully I can kind of showcase that in the work that I do kind of going forward. So I am very in touch with my roots, and it's something that I'm really passionate about.
All right, cool. So I guess then let's get into the conversation. I think the best thing to do is maybe just go back to basics and just find out how you got into gardening and why you chose to do this as to something else.
So, I mean, I don't see it as a choice, really. I see it as something that's fundamental to life, and I think it's something that should be accessible to everyone. I think, you know, our instinct naturally turns us to nature. And so I don't think, whilst there is a hobby or a kind of a luxury of gardening that's being kind of set out, and that's that perception I'm talking about, actually gardening or nature should be something that everyone's involved in. As I said, my influence has definitely been my mum. So I grew up in a council house. My mum was a single parent of 4 of us. And one thing that was always consistent in our life was kind of like reverting back to nature. And, you know, whether that was, you know, the basil plant that sat on the kitchen table, or, you know, our
Yeah.
avocado tree that grew in our garden, in our very, very small garden, or, you know, my mum taking me to the park, and me playing football. So that's another part of my life. I'm also a footballer.
Oh, cool.
But I think that all of these different aspects that my mum kind of, you know, engaged with me in. And my mum was very holistic. My mum was quite ill. She was terminally ill for a majority of my life. And actually, that was the most educating experience for myself. Kind of seeing my mum fight, but through a really kind of pure, holistic way. Thinking about her mental health and her physical health through nature definitely kind of led me, well, in a time of trauma. So the reason why I got into gardening was obviously I live in North Kensington. I lived right next to the Grenfell Tower. And when the Grenfell Tower fire happened, I mean, there was loads of community members that didn't know what to do. We kind of all went into shock. And naturally, you wouldn't know what to do. You don't really plan for these things. And I think losing community members and friends and family and people that you knew, yeah, it was really upsetting. And I think a lot of community members tried to express themselves in whatever way they could. There was so much pent up anger, so much pent
Yeah.
up frustration and hurt. And a lot of people turned to doing artwork on walls. And so I did that for a day or two, and I didn't really feel anything from that. I'm not the best artist myself, but and then saw this kind of half green space. When I say half green space, it was clearly like unloved. It was derelict. It was yeah, it was in need of some attention. So I went into that space. Bear in mind, I had no horticultural experience and knowledge, and it just resonated with me. It just felt right, and I think that's how I expressed myself, and that was through nature. And before that, there was no project or idea or plan. It was just a very spontaneous, impulsive thing that I did that, you know, I've never regretted, and something that has opened so many more doors in my life, in the sense of kind of to my mental health and my physical health and my well-being, and then being able to kind of showcase that to other younger people and other diverse people, and people in general. I don't think you know, we need to box off stuff, but there's definitely a passion from my side of things to normalize people like myself getting into a garden, because I almost felt a bit embarrassed and ashamed of jumping in that garden and doing stuff. You know, my boys would walk
Yeah, I
past,
can imagine. I can imagine like a
say,
lot of
in that garden.
yeah, I can imagine like a lot, especially like a lot of young black males. Like I can't personally see any of them thinking like, oh, let me go and plant this basil. Do even some of them even know what basil is? Do you know what I mean? So it's really interesting to see that. Uh, from how I'm looking at it, it feels like it was almost like a calling for you, that you know you didn't even think about it, and you just went by this space. And I'm sure you probably passed by that space like so many times, and at that very moment that you were there, something kind of, you just knew that this was something that you had to do. And so when you did that, when you went to this space and you took it over, did anyone come to you and say anything like negative about, because I know sometimes in these, like, you know, council spaces, yeah, a lot of them are left like that, unloved. And then when someone comes along and tries to do something positive with it, you get quite a lot of backlash. Did you experience anything like that?
I think that the circumstance and the nature of, you know, what had happened, obviously with the council, you know,
Yeah.
had scrutiny.
Do you think they were scared to say something
For
then?
sure, for sure, because, you know, like well, it's not a secret that when Grenfell happened,
Yeah.
there were no support from any authority. There was no support from the council. There was no support from anyone. They disappeared. And so actually community were left to kind of fend for themselves. And I see it almost as a way of protest, you know.
Yeah, facts, definitely. There's nothing more empowering than literally growing your own food, because then no one can tell you what to do. Like you can cut off the lights, you can cut off whatever, but like if you have your own supply of food and you're empowered in that way that you know you can fend for yourself, no one can, you know, say anything about that. Sorry, go ahead.
Exactly.
I cut you off. Like,
And I think there was real symbolism in kind of, you know, from something that was so dark and so, you know, traumatic. We're
yeah,
kind of growing life and color and beauty out of this community. And it was done by a community. So kind of, yeah, for me, it's all about, well, that was a very spontaneous moment. And then we went on to do other gardening projects in the community, but then still wasn't under a structure. It was very, you know, as I said, it was very spontaneous. And I think on reflection, I was just trying to keep myself busy. I was trying to keep myself engaged in something that I could let my, you know, emotions out in. And then I think that's when things started to change slightly. I then saw, so gardening went from more of a coping mechanism to an
yeah,
art form. And yeah, in reflection, that transition was actually really amazing because I met some really amazing people on that journey, and obviously brought community members together in green spaces, and you know, people I wouldn't usually talk to. I don't know, something about a garden that kind of knocks down those barriers. Do you end
yeah,
up planting something and then someone else will be next to you doing something else, and you naturally want to speak to each other, you naturally want to talk to each other about stuff, and I think there's real beauty in that, and I think I think, yeah, based off the work that we did, and I don't even like calling it work because, as I said, it was more, you know, it was just off the, you know, it was not planned at all.
yeah. It's like therapy,
Literally,
more so.
just literally like, yeah, it was like therapy. It was like, oh, look at that, you know, that space there, it needs some love. Like, let's try and get, you know, community members in there and turn it into something that we can be proud of and something that we can reflect and, you know, have a tranquil space for our community. But yeah, and then I think about a year ago, I then decided, okay, well, actually, we did something really impactful here. We did something really positive. And, you know, I got so much feedback from other community members saying that you really helped, you know, this person and you helped me. And this was really great. So what would happen is, generally speaking, we'd be in the space and it was quite a public space. It was in a pivotal space in the community. So I remember I'd drive around getting like, you know, plants from places for free. We were unresourced, as I said. There was no structure, there was no plan. It was literally just look, B&Q down there, home base down there, this
Yeah,
plant down there. Like, what can you give us? And as I said, like I had no horticulture experience. I didn't know what worked with what at the time.
yeah. So
But
were you like just like YouTubing videos, or like did you?
no.
Oh, so you literally just went off and you just started
Freestyle,
planting.
it was literally freestyle. And it was going, and I mean, that's why
Yeah,
I'm a very organic process. There was
yeah,
no, you know, this particular garden, we call it the Grenfell Garden of Peace. Um, it was, you know, it was just a matter of getting color in there and life in there.
yeah,
And then, I mean, there was some sort of structure to it in terms of the way it was designed, but, you know, me now and me then probably would have completely different ideas for what
yeah.
that's like. But I don't think that that mattered to anyone or myself. I think it was more about the action, the process in which we get to there, rather than, oh, you know, we walk past and you know, it's not like a showcase garden or anything like that. It was more about getting people involved and getting people engaged in these spaces, so that they can kind of, yeah, it is like a therapy, a space of therapy for all of
Yeah.
us.
I think uh, I'm really glad that you said that you didn't have any like experience, and I like the fact that you were just kind of like fearless and you had this idea and you were just going to do it, because I think as well for a lot of like people of color, it's we sometimes tend to like overthink. We think that we need so much to do something or to start something, and we get overwhelmed because we might not necessarily have the education to do it. Like, I mean, the other day I learned to like sow seeds for the first time in my life. Well, as an adult, like it was the first time I learned how to sow seeds, and like how simple it was. And I was just like, if so many like people of color were aware, I feel like more of them would be doing it. And so I guess this brings me to my next question, in the sense of like, so then how do we get like more regular people of color doing it? How do we get more young people involved as well in it? Because for me, I found that, like you were saying, like in terms of like my mental health, especially with the COVID, it's helped me so much, just even just going out to the forest and just walking around, or going to the park, or yeah, doing a planta on the windowsill, just like simple stuff like that. Like, you don't necessarily need a garden to grow something, and you can always start small and like work your way out of there. So how do we make more of our people aware, and how do we try to draw in more young people to get involved and just make gardening like much more exciting? Gardening, farming, horticulture, whatever it is, it's all the same thing to me, because you put a seed on the ground, the sun does its thing, the earth
That's
does
it.
its thing, do you know what I mean? And then it comes out, you did it. So how can we, yeah, involve more people into getting that, into like that spirit?
I think for me, I can only talk about my personal experiences, and I
Yeah,
think being from Kensington and Chelsea, and that one of the wealthiest boroughs or places in Europe, I think, but also has the biggest kind of um, the biggest gap between the rich and the poor. So, North Kensington and South Kensington are completely different places. And I come from North Kensington, obviously where Grenfell Tower is. And I live in a very diverse community, and in a community where there are many blocks and council estates and, residential places like that. And typically, in my very diverse community, there are a lot of lower income families. And I think one of the reasons, for example, like if you take someone who lives, my mate who lives in the block down the road,
yeah,
like, that the fact that he lives in a block and doesn't have a garden, or doesn't have a green space to
yeah,
access, or have, it initially, it automatically kind of deters that person from even engaging or understanding anything about nature. So I think that shouldn't be a reason why a young person shouldn't have access, or the knowledge, or the facilities, or the skills to nature or gardening. And I think that's the very first stumbling block. you know the circumstance in which someone is born and raised in shouldn't stop them from having that access, because I think nature should be accessible to everyone, and especially living in London, there should be more of a kind of a reason to get people out in the green spaces, and make them aware of it. And I think for me, as I said, when I first went into that gardening space, I felt a bit embarrassed, a bit ashamed.
yeah,
Um, kind of, I kind of took it on the chin, and just got on with it, and I wasn't too bothered, and that's the way that my mum brought me up. But not everyone's going to feel that way. Not everyone's going to want to stand in the garden and all their mates walk past, and is a bit it can be quite uncomfortable for some people, because I feel like the way that the gardening community is set up at the moment. So
yeah,
a great example that I can draw is that just down the road is the Chelsea Flower Show, and I can tell you for free that no one from the North Kensington community has had any involvement in the Chelsea Flower Show in its history.
wow,
Um, and Danny Clark, who's a good mate of mine, and he's a director for Grow to Know. He did presenting for Chelsea Flower Show one time, and just on kind of observe, his one of his observations was that he was the only person of color in that
yeah,
space. And it's all good and well to criticize these spaces, and I think these are spaces that are very they're very comfortable with the way that they are. And I think what we need to do isn't knock on their door and beg and say can we come in. It's more about changing the whole structure of the way that we see things, because I don't think it should be oh, let's get a diverse person in just to tick that box.
exactly.
Something that I'm completely against. And I think
The
gardening is
context,
something yeah, I think gardening is something that can be adaptable to anyone. So rather than having myself having to adapt to this exclusive gardening club that is currently out there, that I wouldn't naturally feel comfortable in. Actually, what's stopping young people from completely changing the perception of what a gardener is. And I think gardening is cool anyway, but I know a lot of people don't, especially people that are my mates and people around me. And I think, I just want to showcase how cool it is and the different ways we can do it. The way that I saw gardening before, prior to Grenfell was, it's, like a luxury hobby that, older
Oh
people
yeah,
do, and it is a luxury because, especially living in London, space
yeah.
is
To
free.
have a garden, yeah,
Time is a luxury, and actually, coming from a place where you don't have a lot of income, and you're kind of surviving. Gardening isn't on your mind because of the way that it's been set out, but actually it can go hand in hand. Gardening and being self-sustainable and understanding about the environment and the way that we live, I think, is one of the most important things that you can learn as a young person. And I'm just here to try and change the way that it's set out. So whether that be for a project where we involve, artists like musicians, and try and showcase information in a really kind of modernized way, use online platforms to try and engage with young people, because as a young person myself, I know how much I'm on my phone, I know how much I'm on social media,
yeah.
and so I'd like to think I've got a bit more of a understanding of how to kind of engage with young people. And there's this really exciting project that I can't wait to get going. um, so the idea is that I call it the full circle of health and well-being.
Right.
um, and what we do is we build a calisthenics park. So for those who aren't familiar with the word calisthenics, it's kind of using your own body weight to strengthen yourself and as a form of training. And it's, those bar parks you get in outdoor spaces, like the outdoor gyms, right? So we build one of those, and then we build a garden around it. And the people who use that gym then have to learn how to grow their own foods. And so actually what you're doing is you're connecting the physical health to the mental health to the self-sustainability. And whilst you grow those foods, you then, learn how to cook them, and you come and you eat it together. And it's all about that kind of community feeling. But all these skills, all these very basic fundamental skills that a young person should, well, in my opinion, should be learning at school potentially.
Exactly,
And
exactly.
these are important life skills. And I think, nature is very reflective of, everyday situations, whether it be, the struggles that you go through, or any struggles that you go through, you can always turn to nature and kind of find an answer in ways. And I think that's something that I really want to showcase. As I said, it doesn't have to be plain, bland, and boring that it's been set. I think I've done, with the work that we've done, we've had some really amazing response and engagement with young people, and I want to continue that.
That's amazing. That's pretty sick, mate. Um, so what would you say to like a young person that's trying to like enter into this space, as you said, like uh the demographic doesn't necessarily, suit where we come from. So if they're trying to enter that space and trying to find some belonging within this space, what would you say to that young person? And also, what would you like to see from the people in those spaces that are now going to interact with that person? Because I think it's really important for, I'm sure like some people in this chat have never um, ever thought of it that way, because they're not from, these neighborhoods or these places, or do you know what I mean? So they've never really thought of like, oh, this person might not feel like they belong here, or because also there's a lot of trauma attached to growing food and like gardening with people of color. So what would you say to those people to like, in terms of like have them welcome that person, and what would you say to the person trying to go into those spaces?
I think for me, it's all about normalizing, there's no right and wrong way of doing it,
Yeah,
and I think that's something that's definitely been, you know, it epitomizes, the Chelsea Flower Show epitomizes that, the Hampton Court one epitomizes that, and that kind of perfection to gardening and, learning
yeah,
how to do things. You want to grow a basil plant and it dies, like, okay, that's not ideal, but, we can get a new one and we can try again. And it's all about trial and error. And I think from a young person's point of view, that's the kind of vibe and kind of space I want to create in which there's not that kind of perspective on, oh, you know, it's all got to be perfect, and you know, gardens look like this, and this is right and this is wrong. Actually, just get out there and do it. Just start, that's how I started. That's how my journey began, and it grew on me, and here we are, you know. And I think, you know, if you can just start and get going, then you'll find things that you'll like and things that you don't like. And I think that's, you know, just a matter of kind of starting is what I'd kind of encourage people to do, whether you get it right or wrong or whatever it might be. Just, yeah, freestyle in a sense.
Yeah. So another question that I have for you is, can you just elaborate a little bit more about Grow to Know, and like, so the work that you've done, the work that you want to do, and like if people want to get involved, how they can get involved as well within your movement?
Yeah, so so kind of continuing from the spontaneous guerrilla gardening that we did in the community. That wasn't sustainable simply because we were unresourced. It was something that we just got up and did. There was no structure behind it. And about a year ago, I kind of figured, well, actually, I want to create a legacy around this. And I want to take something that, you know, started off with such trauma and such hurt and upset personally and as a community. And I want to turn it into something that is really positive and full of hope and, you know, educating, empowering and inspiring. And I think that's something that young people definitely need after this COVID situation. You know, after everything that's going on in the world, I think something that gives young people hope is, you know, is always a positive. And what essentially what Grow to Know does is it's all about educating young people about horticulture, and whilst diversifying, you know, the horticultural scene. So naturally, as you start to engage with young people that have never had that access before, you're planting those seeds in their minds almost. So maybe in, you know, and personally, it doesn't have to be an instant impact. It might be that, you know, we engage with a young person and they go, oh, that's a bit weird. That's a bit, it's not really for me. But then maybe 3 years down the line, they're like, oh, I get it now, if that makes sense. I think there's, as I said, ideally, we want to try and kind of change that perception of gardeners to facilitate kind of young people finding confidence within horticulture, and more diverse people finding confidence in horticulture. And I think that's kind of like my personal aims, and it's Grow to Know hopefully will be the vehicle in which we can do that. And yeah, I guess it's all about kind of, yeah, getting young people and more diverse people involved.
Yeah. So do you have any projects coming up with Grow to Know, or
Yeah,
or is that the calisthenics one you were talking about, or there's something else?
yeah, so there's, I mean, if you knew me, like my mind runs at 100 miles an hour, and ideas, we'd be here like all day if I had. But there are a few ideas that are kind of forming and shaping at the moment. And it's, so for me, it's all about kind of changing the way that we do gardening. I think, you know, a lot, you know, doing like, how do I put it? Like the way that gardening is perceived at the moment is, oh, well, there's a you know, a space, we'll go in there, we'll do it up, and that's it. Like almost like a landscaping view of things. I want to change. I want to go into classrooms and schools and kind of do fun workshops and fun projects which kind of captivate these young people. So one of them would be kind of like sustainable planters, where we get them to bring in jam jars, where we create terrarium gardens. They bring in tin cans like their beans or their, you know, paint pots from home, and they'd make herb boxes or herb cans, and then coconut shells where we'd have hanging baskets. And that's, yeah, that's one of the projects. Another one would be, so on Lancaster West Estate, where I'm based, we're looking to do like an allotment space where we actually kind of co-design with residents. So I think it's all about engaging with the community, because what we're very used to, especially as North Kensington, is, you know, an authority coming in and saying, this is how it's going to look, this is what's going to happen, deal with it, kind of thing. I think there's real power in engaging and consulting with community members so that they kind of take ownership and responsibility of that space creatively and the long-term legacy of it. I think there's loads of spaces and loads of resources that are wasted on, you know, places and spaces where you know, someone of authority comes in and that says, oh, this is what's needed, this is how it's, and they've not done any engagement or consulting with anyone,
Right, right.
and no one really likes it. And I think that, yeah, I think the way to go is to actually get the people that are beneficiaries of the space to be fully involved in the design and build process. And I think that's something I'm really passionate about, and something we can do kind of on estates. I've got a kind of um, a name for it, and I call it a state of the art, where you get estates and their garden, because, you know, naturally on estates, not everyone has a garden, but they
Yeah.
generally a green space. And we'd want to kind of turn those green spaces into paradises where they can both, you know, enjoy the space whilst also kind of growing their own foods and showcasing that sustainability aspect of things. So yeah, those are just a few projects, but there's many more to come. And obviously with the COVID situation, it's a bit touch and go at the moment.
Yeah.
But I think it's definitely necessary that we, you know, start doing stuff, simply because, you know, COVID has had a massive impact on our mental health, and it's definitely showcased our kind of lack of food security, I'd say. I think that kind of food growing aspect of things will definitely kind of benefit us in this current climate.
Well, that sounds all very amazing. I can't wait to see some of these projects come into fruition. And yeah, wishing you all the best. And I'm sure we'll definitely like meet and I guess participate together in some of these things. Yeah, so I was just gonna ask Janelle, do you have any questions for Tayshan just right before we go and do the Q&A? I think we have like a little bit more time, and then I think it's time for the Q&A after, right?
I don't have. We would love to continue to work with you at Capital Growth, Tayshan. You mentioning working in schools. We sometimes work with schools, and it would just be great to link you up. I know there's a couple of people in the chat have already said, please come to my son's school and stuff. So that's really good. I've just asked other people in the chat to post in there if they have any questions for you. But it just sounds fantastic, the work that you're doing. I've posted a couple of links to Grow to Know and to Cordwainers Grow for you, Princess. If there are any other links or anything, just let me know. I'll put them in for you. But yeah, no other questions for me. So over to everybody else if they have any questions for Tayshan. Okay, great. We have one from Sarah. What can we do to encourage more people to take grassroots leadership like you have done? What needs to change?
I think it's, as I said, it starts from the kind of education process and making people, like, normalizing what essentially we've done, and what we will continue to do. As I said, I think it's a massive step to take. I don't mind upsetting a few people and kind of calling it out for what it is and saying, you know, I want more diverse people and more young people in this space. And obviously some people aren't going to like that, but I think that, you know, some people aren't really comfortable with doing that, and not that it shouldn't. Essentially, I think that it shouldn't have to get to that. But now that we are here, I think we just need to normalize the idea of, you know, people, more grassroots people, more people that are the community, and that make up those community, getting involved in projects and kind of taking leadership on that. As I said, this was never in the plan. This was never a project or an idea, and I've just stumbled into this space. But now I'm really embracing it. I think there's real power in kind of having people that we can relate to as well. So I can speak on my personal experience. You know, in the horticultural scene, there's not much that I can look up to and say, yeah, he's from where I'm from, or he's had the similar experience to me. And I think the more and more we have these conversations, the more and more we communicate with each other about our thoughts of this space and these perceptions of gardening, I think, again, we're going to normalize more people from a grassroots level getting involved and feeling more passionate about it.
Thank you. There's another. Shall I ask these questions, Princess? Would you like to?
Yes, no, you
I'll go ahead. Okay.
Just
as I'm reading. Okay. Fab. One from Kate. Who inspires you and who supports you? That's a nice question.
So I would say my mum is a hero to me. So my mum passed away earlier this year, but it's definitely something that I see as like a motivating factor to what I do, because I think, you know, my mum installed some really great values and some really some great life experiences in my life, and I think for me, I just want to build a legacy on what my mum's taught me and how she's you know, shown her love towards me, and I think horticulture and nature are definitely a massive part of that. So yeah, my mum's a big inspiration to what I do. Who supports me? I'd say my family. I'd say my good mate Danny Clark, who I've found a really great friend in, who's a director at Grow to Know, like I've said previously. And we've got another director called Ali, who's amazing. Her knowledge is so extensive, and you know, she teaches me loads of stuff too. So I've got a really amazing team around me, and we just kind of want to grow from here. With what I'm doing, yeah, I'm just on a mission really. there's there's no other way about it.
Awesome, great, lovely, thank you. We've got a couple more ones here. Let's see. Okay, from Kate, do you have any advice for how to get involved with gardening if you're kind of a transient young person? She's moved a few times in the last years and struggled to find a place to grow anything or anyone near me or her age to work with.
Okay. I mean, the online kind of aspect of things are really amazing these days. So I recently joined a group called, I think it's POC, so People of Color Gardening Group on Facebook, and people just, you know, they post their picture of themselves gardening and they say, look, hi, my name is X, Y, you know, whoever they are, and these are my passions within gardening, and actually it's an amazing networking space. And so I think there's loads of avenues online, especially if you're, you know, on the move a lot. They say on the move a lot? Yeah. Um, so I think, yeah, especially if you're on the move a lot, there's some real kind of community. There's actually amazing communities online that you can kind of gather support and knowledge and friends from. And I think, yeah, that would be an amazing way to start, I'd say.
There's another question from Catherine that says, what other barriers do you think are there that prevent young Black people to get involved?
What other barriers are there? I think there's definitely kind of a historic connotation behind gardening in
Yeah.
terms of the Black community. Obviously, the Black community have been through a lot historically, and there's quite, you know, without, you know, beating out on the bush, there's quite big links to slavery when it comes to horticulture and Black people and the Black community. And as I said, I think it's all about kind of normalizing, you know, self-sustainability and just showcasing how amazing and beneficial gardening can be. I think gardening isn't really seen as a therapy generally by the Black community. It's seen as, you know, this luxury, this hobby that people do when they've got a bit of time on their hands. And as I said, I think it's got to be normalized as something that we can really benefit from in terms of sustainability, our environment, our mental health and well-being, our physical health, and in terms of our life skills. There's so many beneficiaries to gardening. I think we just got to showcase them, and at the moment they're not being showcased.
Yeah, I definitely agree with some of those points, and I would like to add, like, in terms of like some of the other barriers that I feel with with Black people, especially here in the UK or in Europe, is also just kind of finding our space and like belonging within like this space or the land that we live in, because a lot of us are either first generation immigrants or second generation immigrants. So we don't have necessarily people that we can look up to from the UK that have done it before and that own farms or are in that space in that kind of way. So when you don't see it, you don't necessarily think of it. Whereas like if you are from Africa like myself, pretty much everyone in the family has some sort of like small piece of land that has been given by the government. So you do see people doing it. So then you do have that option whether you want to go into that or not. Whereas like over here, it's not necessarily like that. So I would say that would be probably another barrier, is just the fact that we don't see it, and there's not many people personally that I know of that are within those spaces, and especially commercially as well. Yeah, there might be a few people doing little projects here and there, but you'd really have to look for it. But in terms of it being in your face, I don't think we really seen much of that.
There's definitely a lack of like resources, access, and relatability. I think those are the kind of key kind of,
Yeah.
barriers.
Yeah, definitely. There's another question from Natalie, who says, how do you deal with the young people's disappointments, i.e. when growing doesn't go to plan?
I think if you kind of draw the comparisons of kind of everyday life, and the way that nature reflects everyday life, that everything doesn't always go to plan, and kind of trying to turn something into a positive where it's more of a learning experience rather than a disappointment. It's like, okay, well, what did you do wrong, or what happened this time that you could kind of change next time? And as I said, ideally you don't want to kill any plants, but I mean it happens, and I'm sure like
Yeah,
you're gone and
it will definitely happen. We'll kill a
everyone,
couple.
I'm sure it happens, exactly. I'm sure it happens to everyone, and I think kind of normalizing that we can't get it perfect every time is
Yeah.
the way to kind of get a young person, also to kind of mitigate that disappointment of that young person.
Yeah, definitely. Someone called Amy says, how do you fund your projects? And I guess for me, for my own kind of curiosity as to like, if I was trying to go try and get funding as well, how would I do it? What would you
Sure.
suggest?
So yeah, so that's where when I talked about kind of sustainability and legacy, um, we originally did it as a voluntary thing where there was no access to any funding, and actually I have to say we did quite well with what we literally had nothing. We had to go around to different shops and ask them for different things. Now we've got a structure. We're set up as a community interest company, so it's a non-profit that allows us to kind of gain funding through funders, through fundraising, and through donations and support in kind. So we have a kind of a structure and a vehicle in which we can access resources and then put those resources into places that we can hopefully create a positive impact in. So yeah, that's how we fund our project.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. Oh, yeah, here's an interesting one from Jason, who says, how do we turn the initial passion and interest in growing into lifelong careers? What resources would be helpful to enable this? Because I'm pretty sure there's so many people out there that are very passionate about this, people like me as well. I'm just trying to think of like how I can actually just go on doing this and like, leave the 9 to 5 space. Yeah, how do you think you can go about it?
So one of my big goals is to get horticulture or gardening on the school curriculum. And I think that in terms of what we can do as a society, I think that these skills are essential to a young person or anyone. And I do think that they should be more established in the school curriculum. I think there's not enough spaces to learn about gardening. So there's your kind of the food growing aspect, there's a landscaping aspect, there's a whole art. I see it as art, and
Definitely.
I think there's amazing careers that young people can kind of or someone who's passionate about gardening can get into. It's just a matter of access and kind of facilitating that access. I think is where a lot of this starts, and that's hopefully what Grow to Know will help do. So I mean, naturally we're showcasing gardening as something that's hopefully quite cool and trendy. We're creating awareness around it, but also we do want to have you know, positive pathways and opportunities for young people to go, actually, you know what, you know, landscaping, garden design is something that I really want to do. How do I do it? And then we'll have the answer. Look, this is the qualification you need to do to better your skills, to your knowledge. And I think that's kind of, yeah, we just want to kind of create access to education, really.
Yeah, that's definitely, yeah, I definitely believe that education is definitely like one of the keys to that. And I have a question from Camila, who says, do you help other groups set up projects in their local areas?
So we, in terms of other groups, as in like organizations or...
I mean, I would say, like, if somebody lived in an estate and was trying to set something up, like, would you help other groups? Or maybe if there are other independent groups, like I'm trying to set something up as well for like people of the African diaspora. So as I'm trying to set that up, would you
Definitely.
kind of lend yourself to all these different projects?
Yeah, I think we're always, I mean, you know, we're based in North Kensington, but that's not stopping us from doing something, you know, London wide. I've specifically not made this a North Kensington project because I feel like this is something that we can, you know, we started in North Kensington, and this is how we started, you know, after you know, witnessing and experiencing Grenfell, the Grenfell Tower fire. But there's definitely real power in showcasing this knowledge, you know, beyond this community. And I think what we want to do eventually is run a, you know, a project where, or have a model in which estates can then, or whoever it might be able to use. This is something that Grow to Know, hopefully we'll have the capacity for. Obviously, gardens take a while, and
Yeah,
you know, it's a big investment of time. But yeah, I guess with what we're doing, we're trying to get into spaces and engage with people and get people out and into spaces where, again, they can have a positive impact, both individually and collectively as a community. So yeah, we're definitely here to help other groups set up projects, for sure.
that's pretty amazing. Pretty sweet. Janelle, do you have anything else that you would like to add? I think we are coming up towards the end of the conversation.
I'm not sure, Sarah, you've unmuted yourself, so I'm wondering if you wanted to say something.
Have I? Did I do that?
Yes, I thought it was a sign to say you were.
No, it's
you totally don't have to.
I work with Janelle. No, just thank you so much for today. I mean, I'm really interested in, you know, the agenda that you're bringing forward. I think we're really keen to see how we can also create youth employment in this area. We know that this is like a big agenda for the government.
Yes.
Talking all about green recovery, but where do we put young Black and people of colour in amongst all of that, and how do we make horticulture and food growing something that is inspiring and attractive to them? There's a new fund, but there's a really short deadline on it, which is about green recovery and youth employment. And yeah, we'd love to support both of you in any ideas that you have around that. You know, I think it's appropriate that you lead that sort of thinking and that, but we're sort of here behind you in the van, like helping you on that journey. If there's anything we can do, that would be fantastic. But yeah, really great. And I think, I don't know if any of you also joined our webinar on Friday, which was transatlantic webinar with growers from New York and Toronto, which was really inspiring. And what's quite interesting is the urban growing scene is much more politicized. You know, they're talking about statements of power and taking back power, and it feels like we're behind in that way here. And I suppose it's necessity has bred that in those cities, but it's great to see sort of a surge of, you know, politicizing and activising our young people and doing that around growing. So I think I made a comment on Friday about saying, people keep saying about it's about getting, you know, people around the table, but it's like, actually, I want to set up a different table. I want to come over to, you know, we want to be at your table. This isn't about the status quo. This is about creating something new. So yeah, we're great to see you there taking the lead, and thank you for today.
Thank you. Really appreciate the platform and having me on. Really appreciate it.
Another thing, there's just quite a lot of links coming through in the chat, so I'm going to save the chat. Somebody did ask Tayshan for that Facebook group that you mentioned. If you could post that, that would be really great, and then it'll all be saved. As I said as well, it's been recorded, so there'll be access to this afterwards. We'll send that out to everybody. But that's it from me. Back to you, Princess, if you want to wrap up.
Yeah, I'd just like to say thank you to Tayshan for having this conversation with me and helping me broaden my knowledge in terms of how to involve myself within this space. I'd like to thank everybody that was patient enough to listen to our conversation, and I hope you've taken something from it. And I guess if you're trying to get in touch with me, you can find me through the Cordwainers Instagram, or you can find me on my own Instagram, which is princess.blackfish, which it's a bit hard to spell. So it's PRNCSS.blackfish, and you can find me that way. And Tayshan, if you would like to give your own social media.
Yeah, so go to know on all platforms, so on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And I think you can find us at Grow to Know CIC on all of those platforms, and my personal accounts. It's just my name, Tayshan. If you type in my name, I think I'll pop up. There's not many Tayshans, but yeah. Thank you so much for having me on. It's been a great pleasure. I'm really enjoyed speaking to you.
Yeah, definitely looking forward to have more conversations, because for sure, like, this conversation is definitely far from over. There's still so much to speak about, and there's still so much to do. So hopefully we can all take something back and go reflect. And for the allies of people of color, I hope that you go and really think about how to involve people of color in your spaces, and how you can support them within those spaces, because they might need more support than your regular people that come through, as you've heard some of the conversations that we've had. And for my advice for some people of color trying to get involved into gardening is don't be afraid. It's really not that scary. Just get into it and start to, just throw yourself there and see how you can learn. There's like YouTube, maybe ask some friends around. Some people are really getting into it, and just start from somewhere and build it from there. And I think, you'll see it manifest and grow. Not to be cheesy, but that's what naturally happens when you just throw yourself in there. So Janelle, any last words? You good?
No last words, really, just other than to say thank you, everybody, for joining. Thank you, Princess, for hosting, and Tayshan, thank you for joining us as well and inspiring us all to
thank you
to keep growing.
Really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody. See you at another event soon, and don't forget to check out the rest of the Urban Harvest Online events. I put the links in the chat.
All right, bye, people.